I'm Mary Parker, and welcome to this episode of Eureka's Sounds of Science. It would be hard to overstate the importance of early mentoring in STEM fields. The most well-known STEM jobs, like doctor and research professor, can seem intimidating to some students, even when they have an aptitude for STEM. It's therefore very important for young students to get a more realistic idea of the full spectrum of STEM jobs that are available. It's also important for underrepresented groups or students from underserved communities to be able to see people like themselves have successful STEM careers. To that end, let's meet a couple of STEM ambassadors from Charles River who spend their off hours volunteering to bring STEM to students. Elaine Duncan and Alan McCouvray are scientists who work in integrated biology at our Saffron Walden site. They are both involved in the UK's STEM Ambassador program, which connects volunteer scientists with classes to develop science activities for the kids. Welcome, Elaine and Alan.
Hi, thanks for
Thank you
having
very
us.
much for having us.
Thank you for being here. So, first off, can you both give a rundown of how you came to choose science as a career? Alan, you want to start first?
Yeah, I'll go first. So basically, I was fortunate enough to grow up in Zimbabwe and the UK. And during that time, I've kind of witnessed the spectrum of life on other side. So in Zimbabwe, you get children dying from easily curable diseases. Over here in the UK, you have free healthcare. So from that point onwards, I was always fascinated with science and knowing how cures and medicines work in order to kind of help people, help alleviate some of those issues and those problems faced. And I now found myself here doing exactly that.
When did you go to the UK? Was it for school?
Yeah, so me and my family migrated here in 2005 when I was 9 years old. So yeah, so half of my life was spent in Zimbabwe and half of my life has been spent here in the UK.
Elaine, how about you? How'd you get started in STEM?
So I guess maybe had a bit of a different background, and just that I was always really interested in doing fun science things. So, the sort of putting your putting Mentos sweets into bottles of Coca-Cola and getting the rockets and things like that. And I was just generally really curious about things, and I was really fortunate to have parents and family and teachers who all encouraged and really supported that. So I guess through school, if someone was like, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" my answer was always something sciencey, but I didn't really know what within there. And I guess what might be similar to Alan's story is that I was also really driven to help people, but I did work experience in a hospital and absolutely hated it. I remember I watched a patient get bone marrow taken and I nearly fainted, and the patient was asking me if I was okay, and I think that was the end of my medical career. So I did a very general undergraduate degree that was just in natural sciences that gradually got more specialized, and my first job as a graduate was at Charles River, and that's where I've been ever since.
I've heard this a lot from different scientists who they thought they maybe wanted to be a doctor and they always had an interest in biology. But then when they got to the actual treating patients, they either, had too much empathy or, didn't like the sight of blood or whatever it was. And then they kind of had to do a pivot. Alan, did you kind of experience that as well?
Not really. I think I was kind of lucky that I knew what I wanted to do from a very young age because and because of my biology teacher, Miss Garvey. She really made biology interesting, and she always nurtured my talents and my interests, and she also gave me the magazine The New Scientist, and it was then that I actually discovered what pharmacology was, because I stumbled upon a chapter and it was talking about the drug tamoxifen and how it cures breast cancer. So I was
Mhm.
like, wow, this is the mechanism of how drugs actually work. And from that point onwards, I started writing my personal statements into to go and study pharmacology at university, where I did my undergrad in pharmacology at Nottingham Trent University. And then I actually was like, this is not enough. And I went on to the University of Nottingham to actually do a master's in drug discovery and pharmaceutical sciences. And I just learned much more about the processes behind drug discovery. So I was fortunate that I've always had supportive parents and supportive teachers who've just guided me and led me on this path, really, which I'm actually passionate about.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of leads perfectly to my next question, which is explaining the importance of mentors and role models in your career. So for you, that was your parents and Miss Garvey and other teachers?
Yeah, very much. Everybody who I've encountered has been a mentor to me. I like to learn from everybody. I feel like there's always
Mhm.
something to be learned, but those are the people that have been pivotal in what I have done. Even some of my lecturers have actually inspired me to even further explore the things that I'm currently doing. And the more you learn, the more you discover that there's actually more things that need to be addressed within our fields. So I've actually been
Mhm.
fortunate to be offered a PhD at Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine to actually focus on looking at novel therapeutics in uh, poor and middle income countries to like address issues such as malaria and TB. And that also stems from just having good people pointing you in the right direction and nurturing your talents.
Is that something you were just recently accepted to?
Yeah, so that was something that I got accepted into like last month. So,
That's
oh,
awesome.
thank you very
Congrats.
much. And that also just stems from issues that you learn from university about the importance of diversity. So one of the areas which they focus on is in clinical trials. People from ethnic minority backgrounds are underrepresented within those populations, and you can also see that with the current situation with the vaccines. The compliance is low in those populations as well, and that also stems from issues such as diversity. And uh, I'm the first scientist that most people encounter, so I feel like there's more people that need to learn more
Yeah.
about science.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We were probably going to get into this later, but why not bring it up now? Science isn't just for people that might want a career in science. It's important to have a strong basis in science education because, like you said, it affects your everyday life. So especially in a sort of current world situation we are, where people want to know everything they can about vaccines, but without at least a some basis in science, it's really hard to explain those sort of concepts to people.
It's very true.
Can you explain? I'm just wondering what either of you think are the best qualities in a mentor. Is it just seeing them be successful in their job, or is there some way they interact with you in a way that is inspiring?
That's a really interesting question. I really liked what Alan had said about that almost everyone you encounter is someone that you can learn from. And although we kind of have pivotal people that we can point to as particular role models or mentors, I think what I've learned, and actually probably quite recently, like in the last year or so, is that although it's important to have role models, and for me, when I was thinking about doing this podcast and answering these kind of questions, I realized that anyone that I would count as a role model or mentor tend to be women. And I think for me, the importance of that, I hadn't even noticed it before, honestly, but
Yeah, yeah.
it just meant that it was never weird for me to be a girl in science. There were always people there who had done it first. So I think that's really important. But also what I've learned is that role models are brilliant and they can teach you things, and you can find maybe aspects of their character that you want to emulate, or you're like, I really like that they're so caring, or I really like how they run a meeting and I want to be like that. But you shouldn't aim to to just mimic your role model and everything. They're a person too. They also have flaws. So I think what I've learned is to take the aspects of lots of different role models and mentors that I like to kind of create this version of myself that has all of those traits. And then you become your own role model. Like you're trying to become the person that you see yourself as. I don't know if I've explained that very well, but
No, I like that. I do like the fact that you've acknowledged that role models are people too, and no one's going to be perfect.
right,
And
exactly.
I mean, but maybe that's an important thing to see as well as a student, because, if you idolize doctors, then it's going to be hard to imagine yourself as a doctor.
Right. It's kind of, and also saying, oh, that person does that. I do that too. And kind of making those links, and just like I said, just having those people ahead of you that makes it not a weird thing for me to be a girl in science.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you agree with that,
Yeah,
Alan?
and just to echo what Elaine just said, most of my role models in science have all been females. So like all of my teachers basically have been females
That's really
from what I
interesting.
can remember. Even now when I'm working in the company, and it might be a little bit biased, but working in the e-phys department, I've realized that like women are more attentive to nurturing your talents. So like Sarah and Amy are always encouraging me and always asking me to do different things and always like, "Are you okay?" And that reinforcement has been pivotal in my development during my time at in the company as well. uh,
Yeah,
That's
no,
really
absolutely.
interesting.
I mean, if your mentor can be your boss, that's a total win-win, because, talk about a learning curve. That's a really great place to start.
yeah, that's very true.
But
And just to add
yeah.
on, but then also like qualities that I would look for in a mentor. I think somebody who is patient. Like there's Scott at work. He's very patient and he's always approachable. You can ask him and
Mhm.
have a generic conversation, anything from science and anything about football. And I think that's very important. That's very important, being relatable to the people that you're mentoring as well, in order to have that common ground so that you can even explore different areas that they might be struggling in. I think those are very
Mhm.
important qualities to have.
Elaine, can you explain how the STEM Ambassador program works?
Yeah, absolutely. So the STEM Ambassador program in the UK is run by a group called STEM Learning UK. And effectively what it is a database of volunteers who are from science, technology, engineering, and maths industries. And the volunteers are effectively a resource for teachers to help bridge the gap between what's in a science curriculum at school versus what jobs in those sectors actually look like.
Mhm.
And I think that is a missing link in a lot of science education, at least in my experience. Biology at school, although it was really interesting and I really loved it, it was sort of what can you remember from the textbook that you can then say in the exam?
Mhm.
And actually, as a scientist, that's not what my job is. My job is to be creative and to troubleshoot and to say, oh, well, that didn't work. What am I going to do next time to make it work? Um, and it's practical. And that's something that there's usually practical aspects in science at school and obviously through university, but it's
Mhm.
always like maybe a small portion of the total grade or total coursework, whereas it's 80% of what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So teachers can approach STEM ambassadors to say, we need help with this topic. We're looking at this. Can you talk about how that relates to your work? Or sometimes even we're having a careers fair, or can you do a Q&A with our class when we're talking about science careers? Or it can come from the STEM ambassadors who say, oh, I've got experience in this. Can I help you with something? So that's the foundation of the program.
Elaine, can you tell me what kind of activities you've created for the STEM Ambassador program?
Yeah, of course. So the STEM ambassadors can do lots of things. Like I mentioned, sometimes it's as straightforward as going and giving a careers talk or just having a Q&A with students about what your daily life in science looks like. But actually, one of the more fun things I find is doing practical activities. And one of my biggest drivers has been to make the activities we do directly relatable to the drug discovery industry, because that was something that I didn't really know about until I worked in it. So one of the activities we've got is it's a mock high throughput screen. So in early discovery, one of the first things we do as part of a drug discovery program is develop an assay, which is a kind of miniature experiment to measure the effect of a medically active compound potentially, and we screen thousands and thousands of those through the same experiment to really just get a starting point of what our drug molecule might look like. We've developed a mini version for kids where we take a 96 well plate and we preload that with mostly table salt, sodium chloride, and then we spike some wells with either citric acid, which is an acid, and bicarbonate of soda, which is an alkali. We then make red cabbage indicator, which some people might have done at school or in their own kitchens. If you boil red cabbage, the liquid that you get afterwards is a pH indicator. So what we do is we get the kids from all ages, actually. We've got little tiny lab coats that 5-year-olds can wear. And they have these massive goggles and massive purple gloves, and their parents love it and take loads of pictures. And then they throw purple liquid all over the place. What we actually get them to do is pipette this purple liquid into all of the wells of a column of this 96 well plate. And obviously the wells that have acid or alkali in it will change color. They'll go red if it's an acid or blue if it's an alkali. And we can explain, you've just found a hit. And then we can talk to them about what we do with that hit in order to get it to a medicine that they could buy, like paracetamol or something. So I love that activity. I think it's a really great representation of what we do in our job in a way that's really accessible. And also, everything's food safe, so it's really easy to write the risk assessment. And we've not really been very novel with it. We didn't invent red cabbage indicator. That's something that has been in existence for years, and all we've done is applied it in a slightly different situation that makes it really relevant to the work that we do on our daily basis.
Alan, I understand that you are involved in another program that's geared toward kids in Africa. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, so I am a mentor / ambassador for the Africa Youth Arise Youth program, and we mainly focus on helping children or young people navigate the way through school. Because from my own experience, being a second generation immigrant, what you realize is that my parents didn't know much about the education system here, because it was totally different to the one back home. So if I had people who were not supportive and motivated me and actually pointed me in the right direction towards doing the right A levels and the right choosing the right university choices, then who knows where I would have ended up. So that's the premise of the work that we do, basically representing those underrepresented communities and showing them that there's actually different fields and different areas where you can actually venture into as young people from those backgrounds. And also just aiding young people and helping nurture their skills and their talents and directing them in the right pathways, whether it's working with my friends that are in HR, because some young people are passionate about HR, creating that network so that they have that link and so that they see that this is what actually happens in the daily life of somebody who works in HR, who works in science, who works in the financial sector. So, and that's one of the premise of the work that we do.
Do you know how many countries Africa Youth Arise covers?
So the program recently started 8 years ago, and
Hmm.
we normally just target quite a few young people in this community, but it's welcome to everybody's welcome to join. Currently, we are working with 140 young people, and that number is
Nice.
just going to grow as we gain more exposure and as the program develops itself.
Yeah, it really sounds like a fantastic program because like no one should feel intimidated from any job just due to paperwork or bureaucracy, having someone there to help you figure out what classes to take, what forms to fill out, all that sort of mundane stuff that can seem staggering when you're starting from scratch.
Yeah,
So yeah, that seems like a really fantastic way to go
yeah,
about it.
and that's very true, because some of the times you find that some of the teachers kind of diminish people's aspirations, not by virtue, by just the lack of patience. So I've had friends in
Mhm, mhm.
situations who wanted to go and do science, but they've been discouraged and been told that you have to go and do a BTech, and eventually they
Mhm.
never follow or pursue what they actually wanted to do. So actually just trying to help and bridge that gap, and actually just being there and acting as a role model for the next generation of young people can actually help them, put them in a better place.
Absolutely. And I think that kind of goes back with the activity that Elaine was describing because, like you said, when you're young and in school, it can seem like science is all just like grappling with these big, y- difficult
Yeah.
problems and writing textbooks, when in fact, 90% of your day at some jobs might be using a pipette, which is a skill that most people can handle.
Right, exactly. And I think we've had some really good examples recently of people that have um, joined our company with no science background and they're
Hmm.
doing work with cells and they're great at it because actually a lot of it is process driven. And I don't want to put off people that are good at remembering things because obviously there are certain elements of needing to know like the real basics of science
Yeah, the
and
foundation has to be there. Yep.
of course and uh, people that can remember things. I'm, to be honest, not great at remembering like little details and facts.
Hmm.
But what we don't want to do is tell young people that, oh, because they don't have one or two of those particular skills, then nothing they have is valuable, which is
Right.
absolutely not the case.
Totally. So, Alan, why is it important for kids from underserved communities to have STEM role models in particular? We've kind of talked about this, being able to see yourself in the role is important, but like, why specifically is it important for underserved communities?
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
so it's very important to be represented when people are making decisions, and that's one of the important issues surrounding diversity, because that can be interlinked to multiple layers. So, for example, my favorite example right now is the compliance with vaccines in those underserved communities. But
Hmm.
you might ask yourself the question, why are people not taking the vaccines in Black and Asian communities? And then you have to look at it historically, because
Hmm.
during the 1930s, the CDC and the Public Health Service um, did a clinical trial in Tuskegee. I hope I said that right, where
Hmm.
where
Yep.
they had 600 black males from the sharecroppers, and they had syphilis, but they told them they
Hmm.
would treat them, but they never treated them. And that clinical trial was unethical and went on for 40 years. And
Yep.
it was only discovered once somebody went and shared that information. So as you can already see, that um, individuals from those backgrounds are already skeptical about science. So, as a scientist, it's our duty to try and rectify some of those issues and actually say things have moved on, and actually the area is more diverse now, and there's people who look like me who are actually doing this type of work that actually affects us, and those decisions are shared, and my voice is heard when those decisions are also made. And that's very important in uplifting the next generation as well, because they look to you and think, okay, they identify problems and they also want to fix those problems. So
Hmm.
that's just one example. So I believe as scientists we have to address the mistakes of our history and also try and address them going forward.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up good points about how there's, you know, justified, in some cases, lack of trust, and how it's important for doctors and teachers and, people in those sorts of places of authority to acknowledge the realities of, things that have happened, not even in the distant past. I think the Tuskegee experiment was going on until the 1970s. So, I mean, not that long ago. And that, that has affected entire generations of people and their trust in, drugs and medical professionals.
I think there's also the argument for, like Alan said, actually addressing them. I think we have quite a bad habit as scientists of being, oh, well, it's not like that now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
actually,
Like,
that
maybe
doesn't
not,
do
but
very much. Yeah.
but it was like that. That's the point.
Right, exactly. I remember that, my grandparents actually, when I went into science, were really worried that they knew someone that had got really sick back in the days of mouth pipetting.
Mhm.
And obviously we don't do that we use Gilson pipettes, and we're not, I don't know, doing science with straws. Um,
Yeah.
but that was still a real valid concern from them because of their experience, again, not that long ago. So I think,
Mhm.
yeah, it's really important to actually, like, acknowledge and address and not just brush those issues to the side.
Yeah, absolutely. You gotta show the work that you've done. I mean, that's something that scientists should definitely know to understand. You've gotta show your data. You
Yeah,
gotta show that you've
yeah.
put in the effort. Yep. So, what advice do you both have for kids of any age who are interested in a career in STEM?
Elaine, do you want to go first?
I can go. Yeah, I'll go. Sorry, you can cut that bit out.
No,
Um,
it's all gold. We're leaving it all in.
we'll have an outtake reel. Um, I think I'd just say get involved. It sounds so silly. I think Alan mentioned a really good example earlier about there's just so much material out there. If you're a reader, there's bookshops of sections on popular science. There's
Mhm.
magazines like the New Scientist. I feel like Scientific American is an American equivalent.
Mhm.
Then TV shows. I'm really bad at keeping up to date, but things like, in the UK, Brainiac was a big deal when I was growing up, and they do all that cool science. It doesn't really feel like science. It feels really silly when you watch it, but it
Mhm.
but it is real science and it's important. And so just, yeah, finding those things to get interested in, and then talk to people. You If you're fortunate enough to have other scientists in your network, whether that's parents or friends of parents or distant relatives, I think, as well as being interested yourself, having someone to share that with is really important. Even your
Yeah.
teachers.
What about you,
Yeah,
Alan? What advice would you give for kids? I mean, you give advice to kids all the time. So what do you tell them?
I tell them to just follow their passion, whatever it might be that they
Mhm.
decide to do, just make sure you're good at it. But yeah, obviously, there's a whole plethora of stuff out there now that we didn't have access to when we were trying to navigate this world of science. There's
Mhm.
YouTube channels nowadays with a lot of educational content, podcasts like this as well. And I think that's a very important point, because just having conversations like this and being able to articulate science in layman's terms is very important. Um, Magazines, like Instagram pages, like that just with a
Yeah,
lot of Instagram content and about science. So yeah, just being curious and actually going out there and trying to find things for yourself, and also trying to go into your school counselors and school guidance counselors, if they still have those. Uh, they could also be very helpful.
TikTok. There's loads of TikTok science. I don't have TikTok, but it is a thing.
Do you have any recommendations, Alan?
No, but that's an area that I'm actually gonna be working into, because I feel like I have a lot. No, no, no,
TikTok?
no, 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 no. No, I don't have TikTok. I mean, just creating more content on my Instagram page that's more scientific. But LinkedIn is a good place as well, because you actually get
True.
to interact with the people who are actually doing the science. Because most of the relationships that I have formed have just come from DMing lecturers or other scientists and just saying, appreciating their work, and they're like, okay, message me on here.
Yeah.
So I believe like it's just a matter of networking these days, and actually taking the initiative to reach out, because most of the times people want to help, and they actually will be interested in helping somebody who's passionate about or interested about the same thing that they're passionate about as well.
It was just reminded me that when I was a little kid, I just realized from a young age that scientists were weirdly approachable, even in the olden days when there wasn't Instagram. I emailed Stephen Hawking when I was a little kid because I was a giant
Wow.
geek, and he didn't get back to me, but his assistant did pretty promptly too, and even answered my questions. So it.
Wow.
Yeah,
And
I
most
think.
scientists aren't as famous as him, so they usually answer their own email.
Well, networking is a word that I'm going to say still terrifies me, because it feels like something like putting yourself out there is a very scary thing to do. But yeah, you're absolutely right. A lot of scientists want to help, and actually, you saying, "I really like you doing this," like that's not going to hurt anyone's feelings. Like they'll probably enjoy the compliment.
Well, thank you both for joining me. This has been a really, really fun discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. This was really great.
All right. Thank you for
can I
being
do
here.
can I
Oh
do
yeah,
a
go
shout
ahead.
out to my people at Charles Rivers?
Please. Yeah,
So I
go
want
for
to
it.
give a shout out to my line manager Bex, Scott, Sarah, Amy, and Emma. Who else? Steven. Thank you guys. Oh, and Neil. Thank you guys for being awesome.
Don't forget
Nah, I
Neil.
can't forget Neil and Vad for hiring me.
I'll do a shout out to Yuha. Is my lab manager, is amazing and just has given me so many opportunities. Also the EFIS team for making me very welcome when I started, but generally just everyone in the department is just so nice and friendly and welcoming, and Neil would have a hissy fit if he didn't get a shout out. So that's an important one to get in. We'll get it in twice.
Well, and I'll just give a shout out in general to, all the teachers, all the role models, all the mentors, all the people that are out there making science accessible for kids and making them realize that they can have a real career at it. We really don't deserve you. It's very appreciated.